Well, while we've got you, Billy, would love to talk about Texas A&M for a few minutes. Like this is probably the Texas fan in me who has this take, but I think it's a big deal, and I think it's a little weird that Marcel Reed is not going to be here today.
Yeah.
Of the 16 teams in this conference, everybody who has a returning starter at quarterback brought their quarterback except Texas A&M. Am I overlooking into things by thinking it's a little weird and peculiar that Marcel Reed is not in Atlanta this week?
So I think I know why, and I think I know exactly what Elko will say today because I know him. But when I've been asked that question from the minute I got here to the minute it was announced on our own board, to the minute I got here to 7:30 this morning with Burns and Doring on SEC Network to just now with you, when everyone's asking it, you have to be honest with yourself and go, okay, yeah, it is an attention grabbing omission.
Mm-hmm.
It obviously is because it's what everyone's asking me about. So you can't just say no. But I will say this, knowing Mike Elko and Bucky, you know this with like head coaches, they have a way about them. When we were trying to predict who would come here, who would be the three players, we were at lunch one day, like a little Tex Ags lunch, like 4 or 5 of us, and we were going through and we kind of consensus thought, I don't think maybe one of the 5 thought Marcel. And I personally had him 4th or 5th. I was thinking of Albert Regis, but then I was thinking of, Trey Zune, who didn't come, but he came last year. I knew he'd bring his captains. Zune, Armaje Reed Adams, Torian York. I thought those would be the 3.
Yeah.
And then I was like, Albert Regis has captain about him, like on that team.
Sure.
And then I go, Will Lee was the best player in the spring and is going to be on some all conference teams. And then there's Marcel. I think those were the 5 or so. But I knew Elko, and I just felt like he was going to bring his either seniors or captains or the guys that were kind of decorated and honored to come represent, like the first team all conference guy or the guy. So I didn't think he was going to bring Marcel, and I think that's just a Mike Elko thing. And I also think to some level with Elko, it's like, I'm not bringing you, whether you're my quarterback or my kicker, I'm not bringing you to this unless you've proven that you're one of the 3 most worthy to come to this. I'm not doing it because you're my quarterback. And I've even gotten some questions where people go, well, they think maybe that's not QB1. That couldn't be further from the truth. Marcel has a lot to prove. Don't get me wrong,
sure.
But I mean, he's the starting quarterback without question. This is not one of those summers where there's a QB battle.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I that's what I was going to ask, Bill. I mean, after all said and done, I had a feeling that Mike Elko was definitely going to bring an offensive lineman. So because offensive line has been something special at A&M for, I mean, they're first team All-Americans and everything else, and guys going to the NFL. There's always some offensive lineman that's going to make that trip with him or any other coach at A&M. That's just what goes on. But that quarterback position, I believe that kid right there is the guy that's going to make Texas A&M go, whether it's good or bad. He's going to get the first opportunity to do something. I don't think somebody else is beating him out at summer camp or he's not the starter. I believe he's their bread and butter guy. He just has to be better. And the people around him, and some of them around him have to be a little bit better. And they've got to continue to run the ball. And every year there's 2 or 3 runners, but guys get hurt, things start to falter towards the end of the season. They can't, the Aggies can't afford that to happen with this particular quarterback because the particular quarterback himself is going to be a runner himself. And it doesn't matter for him whether he does it in the air or not, as long as he can get it done. As long as they get wins from this kid at quarterback, I think he was always going to be that guy. I don't see anybody that was going to step in, no matter who they talked about, that was going to be just as good as I thought he could have been last year. And he was a young guy last year.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the thing. He wasn't supposed to start at Texas A&M last year. This was supposed to be his year, Connor Wigman and
sure.
This scenario. And I catch a lot of heat from Texas fans because they don't give me heat for saying I didn't think Ewers was a top 5 pick or a Heisman finalist. And I liked him. I liked Quinn. Sure. I always have. I love the way he throws the football. usually. But they did hold it against me. That I said all the scouts were telling me that they loved Connor Wigman going into last year. And for whatever reason,
Right.
That whole deal did not work. I wouldn't surprise me if he does a great job for Willie Fritz in Houston this year. But Marcel wasn't supposed to start and play very much at quarterback last year.
Right.
And the reason why is he wasn't ready. So when he was thrust in, the fact that he played like he did at Florida, played like he did in the fourth quarter against Arkansas up there a week later, all those things he did, and his struggles came. Okay, remember, he led them from 21-0 down to take the lead with 2 minutes left at Auburn.
Yeah.
The defense gave up. So he on the road took a team back from 21-0 down to take a lead down the stretch in front of 80-something thousand at Jordan-Hare at night. He scored 25-yard touchdown run, led them down the field in the final minute against USC to win that game. Defense couldn't get off the field. What's our conversation like about Marcel then? Because to me, the only times he looked like, okay, this is a kid that hasn't played much football and he's struggling, it was against South Carolina and that defense without Le'Veon Moss because he got hurt in the second drive of that game. And it was against Texas and that defense without Le'Veon Moss. You mentioned it, Bucky, those running backs. That running game took so much pressure off of Marcel last year that when they lost it, and they also didn't have Reuben Owens, when they lost that ground game, teams were able to make Marcel Reed look like an inexperienced quarterback, particularly the two of the three best defenses in the SEC.
Yeah, Billy Liucci from Texags and Texags.com joining us here for a couple more minutes in Atlanta. Look, great start to the year for A&M, 8-2 going into week 11. You talked about the Auburn game, a 4 overtime heartbreaker, and then obviously the Texas game. I mean, A&M was right there. I think a lot of good things in Mike Elko's first year. What's it going to take for the Aggies to get over that hump and make it to a conference championship game this season?
Well, I think first and foremost, we talked about it at length. It's Marcel and that improvement. And I think that's a lot of teams, most teams in the SEC. It's how big an improvement does your quarterback make from last year to this year in their second year as a starter? And then there's so many first-year quarterbacks, Arch Manning, John Mateer, like these guys that we know what they could be, but we haven't seen what they can be yet. So quarterback position's wild, not only in the SEC, but and Gunnar Stockton's another one for a contender. Ty Simpson's another one. You look at Ohio State, who you guys play. You look at Notre Dame, who A&M plays. It's all about question mark at quarterback, and that's A&M too. But the other thing they'd have to do, in my opinion, is, they're going to have to get significantly better on defense than they were a year ago. And that's been Mike Elko's calling card, and they fell way short of that last year. And so he said, enough. I'm going to be the DC. This is my defense. I'm going to run it in the day-to-day, and I'm going to call the defenses. So, in a perfect world, that would have worked out exactly as he wanted it to. It did not. And he's just going to take a much more hands-on approach this year and kind of go, hey, if this thing fails, it's not going to be failed because it didn't get my full attention.
Yeah.
Billy, there's a lot of teams on their schedule, and same with Texas, that have a lot of desperate head coaches coming into this year.
Yeah.
Mike Elko in his second year, he's not a desperate head coach. He just wants his team to get better, and they're probably going to get better. But there are a lot of desperate teams that are on that schedule that will be playing each and every game to keep their coach's job, to keep them from being unemployed. So that adds a little bit more pressure for a young quarterback. And he's got to, whoever's coaching quarterbacks and coaching the offense this year have really got to get him into a spot where he's not throwing picks. He's not giving up opportunities to get first down, keep the clock moving, and things like that. And desperation is something that can be very special to coaches when they're making, a bunch of money, and they could lose their jobs because they don't only lose the job for themselves, but for a lot of people around them. And I look on the schedule, and there's a couple that you guys got to face too.
Yeah, so, yeah. I think desperation. You look at Arkansas, you look at Florida, you look at Auburn.
Yeah,
those three really stand out. And the other thing about it to me is you look at the quarterbacks the Aggies have to play. Sellers, Lagway, Arch. I'm forgetting. There's another big one on there. Sellers, Lagway,
Nussmeier,
Arch, Nussmeier. Yeah, those four. I mean, that's a 30-year games right there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't count these guys that are the unknowns, like at Notre Dame.
Right.
Jackson Arnold, does he have a turnaround at Auburn? There's some unknowns in there as well, but those four really stand out. And when going back to, you talked about the desperation, and I talked about the defense. When you combine all of that, you go, man, they better be a lot better on defense in the back end, and they better be able to get after the quarterback. Which that's the one part. That's the one part I feel actually better about, is I think that secondary is going to make a big jump.
Yep.
They got a couple of new guys, starter from Washington, Julian Humphrey, who I actually thought played really well in Austin, but ended up losing his job, but started 10 games at Georgia. And then they added Tyreek Chappelle, who was out last year. He got hurt in the second game, and it was a killer because he was kind of their do-everything nickel guy. So I think the secondary makes a pretty significant jump. And then my question mark is going to be that pass rush. Can they get after the quarterback? They lost Scorton and Stewart.
Yeah.
But they lost a lot of talent, but not a lot of sacks. How can these younger guys do it? And if there's a name for me to tell y'all to look out for,
please,
on each side of the ball, it's Casey Concepcion, the transfer receiver, who I think is a real playmaker. And then defensively, it's Cassius Howell, who at times last year to me looked like their best pass rusher, even though they had a first and second rounder at DM.
Yeah. Last one for me, Billy, is, your thoughts on Texas, right? I mean, obviously you cover A&M, but you can't cover A&M without paying attention to what Texas is doing. A lot of hype surrounding this Longhorns team. Obviously they lost a lot, 12 guys drafted a couple of months ago. Your thoughts, your expectations for this Longhorn team in 2025?
It's interesting because I'll get blasted for saying this,
of course.
They won't, because they won't hear my follow-up to it. I don't think Texas is going to be as good this year as they were last year, because I think that offensive line was elite. It was arguably the best in the SEC, and they had a bunch of grown-ass men and NFL blockers and guys that have played and worked together for a long time. I think Texas should have done what they did to A&M against Georgia. And I'm not saying A&M's defense is as good as Georgia's, but that game in Austin, I'm like, just line up and run it at these guys with those backs, with that offensive line, and then set things up in that passing game, that great tight end. And I just thought Texas was so elite in the trenches last year. And I know what Colin Simmons is, and I know the depth they've got. He's incredible. Sure. Anthony Hill, one of my favorite players to watch in college football. And by, as you guys know, a great kid too. But I think Texas lost. This is where people stop hearing me. I think they lost so much, and I know that they're in a reload type mode, but so is Georgia and so is Ohio State. I think they're not going to be as good, but I think you can say the same about Ohio State. You can say the same about Georgia. I think the teams that they have to beat to get back there also aren't going to be as good. So it's not an insult. I just think the gap between Texas and maybe some of these other teams on their schedule is less. You look at an A&M, you look at a Florida. Who else y'all got? I don't think Vandy or Kentucky. A&M, Florida, like those, that gap's going to be a little less too. So with that said, I think Texas, I'm torn between Bama, Georgia, and Texas as the three teams that I think are most likely to go to Atlanta. And I think Texas goes no worse than 10-2 and makes the playoffs. And then it's just, how good is Arch by then? How far has that offensive line come? And then you take your chances. And I think Texas will have as good a chance of anyone, because I don't think there's going to be a dominant team this year. It's not a Texas thing. I don't think Notre Dame's as good.
Yeah.
The team I think everyone's sleeping on, because they're who they are and because their head coach is who he is, it's Penn State. And they don't look at Drew Aller. And I go, in a year where there's not a lot of experience at quarterback, I'm looking at Drew Aller and Penn State, and I'm looking at Cade Klubnik and Clemson. And those are two teams I'm putting little asterisks by, because though Aller's not like an incredible quarterback, he's a good quarterback, and he's a veteran quarterback. And that team, Penn State, I think will be better than maybe everyone they play this year. And same with
Billy.
Clemson.
My last thing for you is this Texas defense that you've seen over the last 2 years. Sark is really. Did you think last year, after what happened the year before with the great defensive line that they had, that they would come back again last year? And I mean, you're seeing some young stars on this Texas defense. And my thought, I'm in a similar line of what you are. I'm thinking they may lose one more game than they lost last year, even.
At most, for me.
I've got that. But what about this defensive line? Are you impressed with the defensive line and what this defensive staff has done?
Yeah, absolutely. As an Aggie, I'll sit here and go, I want, contrary to what people think, it's not like I look at Texas and I want, like, I don't want them to get too high before A&M gets up there, but both of them being great would be optimal for our fun,
yes,
for our conversation, for our water cooler talk. But I'm watching them and I'm like, can Pete Kwiatkowski take the Notre Dame job? Can he get an NFL? I know he can get one. Can he go to the NFL? Yeah. Because that, to me, that dude, and I remember, and this is the other thing I try to remind my Texas friends, including Amanda, who I do the podcast with.
We went to school together.
Did you?
Great friends.
Yep. Keller?
Yep.
At
UT. Yeah, same age. Yep.
She's awesome.
Yep.
But she will talk more smack to me than anyone that I know. I'm trying to figure out how to, win one of these battles soon. But I remember when she didn't say this, but a lot of Longhorns, they wanted Kwiatkowski to be like a one and done or two and out. He's elite. He is as good as there is in college football. And, and more off the edge. I thought he was a difference maker last year down the stretch. Obviously, Simmons and Hill. And then the thing with Texas that'll be the most interesting to me defensively is all that defensive tackle depth that they added in the portal. Like, I know they're all going to be solid. Which one or two are going to emerge as special? Because I thought Broughton and Simmons last year were monsters.
Yeah,
they were monsters. And Broughton was a lot better than I thought he was going to be coming out of high school. I said Simmons, I meant Collins. Alfred Collins, finally, like, it took him a while to fully put it together. He was a monster. I had scouts coming up to me in August. I'm like, I just don't know if anybody's going to have somebody that can block him.
Yeah.
My big question will be those guys. And then my other thing is, I thought Jahdae Barron and Makuba were I thought Makuba was a game changer.
Sure.
Obviously, we knew what Barron was. Barron, by the way, is a guy Mike Elko loved and wanted so badly when he was committed to Baylor. And then Texas came in late, but I remember Elko kept pushing on Jimbo to try to, like, really push there, and they never I think he would end up in Austin, being where he's from, but they never really did. But when he was at Baylor, it was like, that's the guy, that's the best one. But replacing them and both coaches, right?
Yeah.
Terry Joseph and now, why am I forgetting our safety's name?
Blake Gideon. I figured a rival fan would remember that one forever.
Well, he didn't. I don't know what he did against A&M, but I liked Blake. Blake was a real player.
Yeah.
But those two guys, losing them and those two players, I want to see. I know the talent's there. I know how they recruit. I just want to see it. But look, they're playing an Ohio State team with a ton of inexperience at quarterback, just like A&M is doing at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So, like, both these teams, it would be great for the SEC if these two teams can go up there kind of in the upper Midwest and come
absolutely.
up with September wins.
Yeah, two teams that played for the national title last year.
It's the and it's the Longhorns and the you're right, exactly.
Sure.
The Longhorns and the Aggies playing the two teams that played for the national title last year, and it's the Buckeyes and it's the Fighting Irish. And this is more on A&M coming off of an 8-5 season, but like both these teams to say, and Bucky, you've coached in this rivalry for a long time. I've covered it for literally a quarter century, believe it or not. Like, if we want it to be what it should be in November, not just this year, but every year, what an opportunity for the Aggies and Longhorns to go in September and say, okay, now how excited are you about that game in Austin now?
Right.
After watching this. So, yeah, it would be really important and special for the state of Texas and football in this state to go beat the Ohio State and touchdown Jesus on the road early.
That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
You going to that game?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
It's fun.
Absolutely.
It's fun. Billy, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Appreciate you.
No, it's a busy day for you.
Absolutely.
You're getting pulled in 50 different directions, but thanks for a
Thank
few
you,
minutes
Billy.
today,
Good to
man.
talk to you, buddy.
All right, Bucky. Great catching up, man.
Awesome.
See ya.
Billy Liucci from TexAgs and TexAgs.com.